Hello, ladies and gentlemen. 3 months into the war between Israel and Hamas, IDF forces are now deepening their fight. At the same time, the army reduces reserve forces on the ground and prepares for the third phase of the war. In the north, Hezbollah continues to launch rockets against both Israeli military and civilian targets, but still, at this hour, remains beneath the threshold of a total war. On other fronts, the Houthis in Yemen and the Iranians managed to stop cargo ships in the Red Sea, and the smuggling of many weapons from Syria to Jordan still continues. And there's also this. To this moment, there are still over 100 young women, small babies, elderly men, and young soldiers in Hamas captivity. Is Israel headed towards an ongoing war with no end in sight? What are its plans for the day after, and are they in line with the current principles and conditions of the Biden administration? While American pressure on Israel for humanitarian aid in Gaza increases with every day of fighting, it is important to ask, what is in store for us in the upcoming months? How can Israel reach its war goals and still receive support from its greatest ally? And who are the main important actors to take under consideration in this forecast? I'm Adi Kantor, and to provide some clarity in this complicated labyrinth, I'm happy to have next to me in the INSS studio today Professor Chuck Freilich, who is a senior researcher at INSS, who served for over 20 years in Israel's national security establishment, and as senior analyst, and finally as a deputy national security advisor. Freilich is also the author of Israeli National Security, a New Strategy for an Era of Change. This was published in 2018 in Oxford Press. So thank you very much, Chuck, for joining me in this talk, and thank you for being here.
It's great to be with you, and I think you summed up everything. We can go home.
Unfortunately, this is the situation laid in front of us. We'll try now to at least touch some of the challenges that I just mentioned, and see maybe you can clarify some of these challenges to our viewers. So before we dive into the U.S. Israeli relations and its current situation with regards to the war, when discussing the day after, how it's supposed to look like from the Israeli perspective, we'll reach the American perspective. What does Israel want to see? As far as we know, what does Israel want to see in Gaza in the day after the war?
Well, I think here you're touching on a critical and sensitive question, because we're now in the beginning of the fourth month of the war, and at least publicly, the war's objectives were defined in a problematic way. Now, on the one hand, I fully understand the political echelons, the political leaders' problem on the first day of the war, a horrible massacre, unprecedented, and they had to come out and respond strongly. But at the same time, by saying that we were going to eliminate Hamas as a military force and topple them as the government, we set an extremely high bar, which may be unachievable, certainly at where we stand today after 3 months and for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. Had they, for example, said, well, we want to cripple Hamas, downgrade its capabilities greatly, weaken its governmental control, then now we'd be able to declare victory already. And the way things look at the moment, it doesn't look good from that point of view, mm-hmm. because we really are still far from both of those objectives after 3 months.
Even though the leaders did say in the beginning that we're headed towards, this is going to be a long journey. It's not going to be 48-hour thing and that's it. But we are headed for, they said, long months.
Well, I don't know if they said long months in the beginning. I certainly don't think that the public impression was that we were going to be mm-hmm. involved in anything nearly this long. Mm-hmm. It certainly wasn't
longer than what people thought.
I think the initial assessment was that we were talking maybe about weeks.
Weeks.
Not months.
Okay. So now when we are now looking at the U.S. administration and what Biden would like to see, where do you see, what are the main challenges now in in Biden's discussion with Netanyahu, what does Biden want to have? I mean, on the one hand, the messages are clear. Israel has the right for self-defense, humanitarian aid must be increased, and casualties among the citizens in Gaza must be reduced. How should all these three elements be reached and at the same time bring to Israel's victory in the war and return the hostages? Some of these elements contradict each other. So how does it look like from your point of view?
Well, I think in the beginning of the war, we had really remarkable American support. I think we still do, but it's changed, and I'll get to that in a minute. In the beginning, it was just really phenomenal. We could not have asked for stronger American support. And the alignment of strategic objectives was basically the same. In preparing for our talk today, I made a short list for myself, 3 columns, where we agree completely, where we agree partly, and where we disagree. Unfortunately, the first column has one item in it, and even that is questionable, and that's the return of the hostages. And I say even that's questionable because I think that the prices that the U.S. and that Israel might be willing to pay for the return may be different. But as an objective, we're still okay. The administration still is committed to the idea of Hamas being destroyed both militarily and as the political, as the government in Gaza. I think at this point they've come to terms with the fact that that's not going to happen. And they're thinking about a day after, which does not include the end of Hamas, or at least not for the very long time. So that's an area of disagreement, or at least some disagreement.
Is it, by the way, declared publicly?
No. This is my assessment of where the administration is. I think Israel has now accepted the American approach of moving to stage 3 of an ongoing lower intensity, still not necessarily low, but lower intensity.
What will we see on the ground from what we're allowed to say, of course, that is not censored?
And what we know.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see the kind of massive aerial bombings that we've seen until now. And we'll see, look, partly it's just because we've come a long way in terms of achieving the military objectives. So we'll see more limited ground operations with a significant part of the Israeli force withdrawn from Gaza and going in to attack specific targets as they become available and as necessary.
Very similar to what is happening currently in the West Bank, would you say?
I'd say more so.
Is this the direction,
at
least?
No, it's more so. In the West Bank, it's more small unit
very precise, very
operations.
limited, limited actions, and then immediately going out.
Right. Okay. Here we're talking probably more brigade-sized operations, and maybe they'll stay in a little bit longer. But the idea, yes. So here maybe we're pretty close at this point. The U.S., I think, wanted us to move in this way already, and we've just begun. But here, okay. In terms of humanitarian aid, Israel has come largely, not completely, to the American position. In the beginning, there was actually disagreement on that, and the need for fuel, and the need for the great care regarding civilian casualties. Not that we didn't care about it in the beginning, but the U.S. was pressing for more, and I think we've moved a lot closer, not completely, because the U.S. is still pressuring us on that. The U.S. wants the PA a new, renewed, revitalized PA to
a new version of a Palestinian Authority in Gaza.
And again, here I think Israel has moved towards that out of the realization that there's no real alternative.
This is the question. Is there an alternative to what we have at the moment?
I don't see it. I think that Netanyahu very much did not want to go in that direction, and his coalition particularly did not want to. But I think he's quietly maneuvering in that direction simply because I don't think there's an alternative. And then another area where we partly agree, or maybe here actually I should say mostly, is on the Iranian nuclear issue. And I should say mostly because actually I don't think either the U.S. or Israel has a strategy at this point for dealing with Iran. Certainly with the nuclear issue, it's been shunted aside by the war, which is a danger in itself. And I don't think anybody knows how to go forward other than to pray.
Yeah, wow.
And finally, the areas where we really disagree or significantly disagree is in terms of the future of the peace process, because the U.S. wants, after a short transition period, to try and renew the talks and use that as a way to...
With whom? To talk with who?
With the Palestinians, with the PA, right?
This is the question, yeah.
And to use that as a means of renewing the normalization with the Saudis and potentially others to at least save that. And the other areas is Lebanon, where, for I think both good substantive reasons and unfortunately political reasons, there are people in Israel who are pushing us actually to take the initiative, and maybe for us to initiate a major confrontation with Hezbollah. And the U.S. has been working since the beginning of the war to prevent that from happening, preventing both sides from doing it. The pressure until now was mostly on the other side, and now I think it may be more
on
towards
Israel.
us. Yeah.
Uh-huh. How do you think? How does the U.S. elections? How do they affect the positioning of the U.S. toward with regards to the war? What are Biden's limitations at the moment in this coalition? How does it look like from that perspective? It's a very inner,
No, it's an
inner problem.
Question. It's a critical question.
Because I think this influences a lot of what we are seeing here, but there are many, many factors influencing that.
It's 10 months till the elections.
Mm-hmm.
There are some in the U.S. who have argued that the outpouring of opposition to Israel on the Democratic left, especially among young people, could cost Biden the election, because he needs the young people. He needs them to turn out if he wants to win. And it could cause him Arab American and Muslim American votes in some important areas. For example, Michigan, where there is a sizable Muslim population and where it could decide the outcome in Michigan. Now, I think Biden has proven beyond any question that he is a wonderful, magnificent friend of Israel. Couldn't be better. But he also wants to get reelected, and that's probably his number one strategic objective this year. And there may be something of a clash here. Now, I think he really will continue to do his best to avoid the clash, to continue giving us the support that we've had, but we may see some change. It's worth noting that the defense minister, Mr. Gallant, a few weeks ago already, publicly expressed concern about the U.S. cutting back on the supply of munitions. And had we not been transitioning to phase 3 of the war in Gaza,
which means reducing a little bit the forces, the reserved forces.
No, and reducing the scale of fighting.
And using less ammunition, maybe.
And if there is an escalation with Hezbollah in the north, he's going to be under huge pressure to at least cut munitions. There are some people who talk about cutting aid to Israel completely. That won't happen. But to start pressuring us, let's say, with munitions or in the Security Council, he may have no choice.
What are the implications for Israeli civilians who, we're talking about more, I don't know the exact number, but tens of thousands of people who are evacuated from their homes. Now we're going to the northern border, who are for more than 3 months now not in their homes. What does it mean for them? Not being able to go back home for how long?
It's another one of the very painful questions that arise from this situation. I think the U.S. is trying to make a diplomatic effort in Lebanon to see...
Not only the U.S., also France.
France, and they have some support.
Yeah.
I think it's from Qatar or whoever is
try to solve the situation diplomatically, if this is the question.
There's a Hebrew expression, Ashrei Ha'mamin, blessed are those who believe that it'll work. Let's hope, because the alternative may be that we have to take military action. I think one can make a good case that this would be good timing to do it. We're fully mobilized, we're ready, the reserves are trained. The U.S. still has one carrier in the region, which is still a major force. And so Iran should be deterred from getting involved. And so hopefully it's just us and Hezbollah with some meddling by the other Iranian militias. You can make that case. And for the people who live near the north, the alternative, having to live with this, with the Radwan forces, the Hezbollah forces right on the border, is a bit of a nightmare. I don't think we can afford it from a strategic perspective now. I mean, there's a limit to how much the traffic can bear. I think we will create a situation, the groundswell against us in the world. You can't live alone in the modern world. I think the groundswell in the U.S. will be so bad that this could force Biden into doing the things that he clearly doesn't want to do. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, what's the price that the Israeli home front pays? The war in Gaza is going to look pleasant compared to what this is going to look like. So I don't think that this should be done. And I know that there are people who think otherwise for legitimate reasons, and there are people who are playing with this for illegitimate political reasons.
Let's go now to another front, troubling front, the Houthis in Yemen. There seems to be, according to a press release, that there's a plan for a British-American attack against the Houthis. How does it look like from this front? How to deal with this challenge, the Houthis in Yemen?
Look, I don't think the U.S. wants a significant escalation. And they're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't position. On the one, if they don't escalate and hit back hard, then the Houthis will
continue. And they do.
Right. They'll do it. And other Iranian militias, we see them, for example, hitting American forces in Iraq and Syria regularly.
Yeah.
So if you don't do it...
So there's already a war. Not just against Israel, but also
I wouldn't
US.
call it a war. I mean, there's a threat to international shipping and mostly to Israeli shipping.
Yeah, but it is an international problem. It's not just an Israeli.
Yeah, we like to think that, and we like to say that Iran is an international problem and Hezbollah is an international problem.
You don't think so? You think that it's more a very it's an Israeli.
It's 80%
headache.
An Israeli problem and 20% an international one, because the threat isn't just to Israeli shipping. There are non-Israeli ships not going through the Red Sea and the Canal today. It's an Egyptian problem as well. But we tend to be very focused on our own troubles,
or maybe to try to have as much as allies as possible to have.
Okay, and we have the U.S. there, and they are doing what they can. Again, I don't think Biden wants an escalation because no one in the United States today wants another Middle Eastern war, as the expression is. Okay, and the Houthis,
question is, are we not already there?
I don't think the U.S. thinks so. Mm-hmm. I think, again, they see a threat to international shipping, which has to be addressed through diplomatic measures, through some limited military ones. And it's not as if you're talking, again, a conventional military force that you can hit and maybe really deter them. We're talking another terrorist organizations, a sub-state actor, or whatever term you want to use. And it's, as we know from our own experience,
how difficult it is to fight against an entity like this. And a terror organization.
It's a sponge. You hit it here,
and not an army. Yeah. I wish we had more time to delve more into other problems, but I do want to ask you, from your experience, you have personal experience also in U.S. campuses. You were a lecturer at Harvard University and also now just returning from NYU, lecturing there. You have Columbia. You were very close to. You are still very close to the discourse, the academic discourse, the American discourse in academia. What we've seen there is, I think, to say it simply, is just horrible situation for Jewish students, for Israeli students studying there. How do you explain what is happening to the progressives, to the liberal left, and their stand against Jews, against Israel? Not, for example, against Jewish women and what they went through on the 7th of October, the rape, the mass raping. How to even start explaining this?
I had the displeasure of walking around the Columbia campus a fair amount. Mm-hmm. NYU is just part of the city. There's no real campus. So I didn't feel it as much there. But at Columbia, there are demonstrations all the time, free Palestine, and from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea.
Without even knowing where the sea is.
No, of course, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Large numbers. For example, it turns out, I didn't even know this, there's an annual day in New York where the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center, the biggest in the city, maybe the biggest in the U.S., is lit, and there's a ceremony there. And it turns out Columbia does the same thing. In both cases, and by the way, the same thing happened on New Year's Day when the ball dropped at Times Square. In both cases, the ceremonies, the celebrations, not ceremonies, were taken over by pro-Palestinian demonstrators with the Free Palestine, etc. Walking around the campus, in the beginning there was a big counter demonstration on the part of the Jewish students and pro-Israel community. They seemed, from what I understood afterwards, to move their events indoors for security reasons. And you walked around. The truth is, the numbers weren't that big, but it was the volume of the demonstrations. And at what was supposed to be a Christmas thing, all of a sudden you see a few hundred Palestinians. Mm-hmm. I must say, I personally did not feel threatened walking around. But if I was a Jewish student, I was 18, 20 years old, I'd have been very uncomfortable there. And we see this. This is all right. So that's Colombia. Colombia has always been a center of more radical politics,
radical left. But I mean, the president.
You see it across the campuses, and I think we're about to. We saw at Yale,
the president of Harvard, the president of Penn University. Is everything a matter of context? Killing Jews is a matter of context.
It turns out, look, remarkably, we are now part of the oppressors, the Jewish people. They think that we're all white. I suggest that they come and walk on the streets of Israel. They might get a different impression. But we're all privileged.
The majority of Israeli citizens, I think, are Mizrahi even, and not even Ashkenazi. So,
okay.
But for this, one needs to have the knowledge,
which is sorely lacking here. But you see, so we're part of the privileged, white, well-to-do, colonial, racist oppressors. Mm-hmm. You see, it's incredible. Women's groups identifying with Hamas. Women. Okay, and of course, when Israeli women are raped, it's par for the course.
There's silence about this. Yeah,
LGBTQ groups identifying with Hamas. I mean, the price of being gay in Gaza is death. And Israel is a country which has got a pretty good record in these areas.
And they don't know this? Is this ignorance? Is this pure anti-Semitism? Is this ignorance? Is this not realizing what the reality is?
I had a gay student this semester. Openly identified. And I said to him one day, and he looked at me and said, yes, you're totally right. It's insane. I'm always telling my friends, but nobody wants to hear it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't fit the narrative. Mm-hmm. And I heard an interesting analysis of this, or I read more correctly in the last couple of days, somebody saying the cognitive dissonance here is so strong when you say, well, Israel are the horrible oppressors, but it turns out that on women's issues or gay issues is totally wrong. How do you bring these two belief systems together? And so the answer is to deny with the evil that you're reading about and just accept the negative narrative.
And the problem is that it's not just, students marching with flags. It's heads of universities. We're talking about presidents of universities not standing with Israel, not denying, and not just denying, not referring to the events, not referring or referring only to what is happening in Gaza to Gazan civilians. This is very depressing, very, very hard situation. Chuck, I really want to thank you. Our time is up, unfortunately, but I think it leaves more to the next show. Thank you very much for joining us today and for clarifying some disturbing issues regarding Israel's national security. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.